Hello to the curious and thoughtful. It's Ellie here again with another episode of Rambling. I wanted to talk to you today about the way that we kind of get control over people these days. The way that we shut them down or wish we could shut them down if it's all going a bit pear-shaped. We don't like the direction that they're traveling in or the things that they're saying or they're thinking. It was not that long ago, maybe around 200 years or less ago, that we would punish people by burning them at the stake or putting poison in their drink or something like that. And it was a really dangerous world back then. The powerful people would use tactics like that to maintain control over others and to control anyone who stepped out of line. They would basically just be eliminated in the physical sense, like really eliminated. And more recently, say in the past 100 years or so, it kind of changed a little bit. It became a bit more tough guy mafia-ish, and it could have been slightly smaller scale. But, putting the screws on someone or kind of creating these threats and setting them up in some way so that they would end up in a physically dangerous environment was pretty typical. Your kind of Godfather-ish kind of scenario wasn't really that uncommon from 100 years ago until, I don't know, the late 20th century. But these days, it's a much softer world. I know that we've got our problems and people still do die and there's still violence and on the similar scale to what there's always been in the world. But overall, the examples of that are fewer. And it is a softer world. People still do have power, but it's being exercised in a different way. And it's more of an egalitarian thing too. A lot of people have this very power of controlling others, especially when they create groups for themselves. We don't go around using mafia-style tactics as frequently anymore, and we don't have this royal kind of power generally to be able to just eliminate people or physically, burn them at the stake or feed them poison or anything like that. What we use now are things like moral verdicts. So we judge a person, we pronounce the judgment as being true, and then we elevate ourselves to righteousness on the backs of that. And we do it with the deepest of conviction about how we feel. We often believe that we have become righteous by judging that other person for whatever it is that they've done. And we call it things like cancel culture. However, in the world of psychology, it's not the term cancel culture is not what's being used. It might be what we use, but the term that is being used was coined by the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, and it's psychic projection. So what is psychic projection? Well, psychic projection is the idea that everything that exists unconsciously within ourselves is what we actually see in other people. And we fight it. We don't like knowing that, because when we cast a moral verdict or judgment on someone else, we like to feel righteous because we say we don't have that trait. But one of the reasons why we see it in another person is because it's within us. And the very things that we hate about someone else that stand out and really grate on our nerves is actually, according to psychology, just a projection of our own inferior side or our inferior self, the opposition of the higher self, so the lower self. And it's something that we generally have suppressed in ourselves, which is the reason why we deny it. We're very afraid to confront it and very afraid to admit it. The thing about psychic projection, which we refer to as cancel culture, is that it feels really great when our side wins and successfully shuts something or someone that we oppose down. But the reality is that all we're really doing as a collective when we exercise cancel culture against each other is we're eating ourselves alive. And I'm going to show you two examples coming from two opposite sides of the spectrum, and I'm going to show you why they prove this theory of mine true. So I'm going to look first of all at this conservative leading idea that's recently raised its head in the news. And it's about rewarding people through merit rather than through something like an equal opportunity regime of some kind. And it's called meritocracy. So it's a conservative leaning or politically right-facing kind of idea. And the liberal side or the left side is opposed to it, saying that it threatens social democracy or equal opportunity frameworks and systems. But the true meaning of meritocracy, which is the idea that's been put forward through the conservative side, is that it relates to the advancement of a person based on their ability or their effort or their achievement, rather than anything like nepotism or favoritism or oligarchy or aristocracy or cronyism or anything like that. Now, as a woman who worked in policing for a long time, over a decade, maybe even closer to 15 years, I know what it's like to have to fight to be considered equal, because policing is a stereotypically male-dominated field. And in a meritocracy or in a merit-based system, some fields actually consider you to have more merit if you're a male. It's just sort of automatic. And so I understand that there's flaws with the idea of a merit-based system. It's the same when it comes to gender or ethnicity. So, if you're a white male in a field that's dominated by white males, the merit system may preclude you if you are black or brown or come from some ethnic background that is not considered to be, the right one, or if you're female or non-binary or whatever. But what actually happened, according to the Carl Jung take, or the Jungian kind of philosophy of shadow dynamics, is that the collective shadow took effect with the liberal viewpoint. And a projection of the liberal discomfort about inequality and privilege was piled onto the idea of meritocracy. And it turned it kind of into a dirty word. What happened was, in this theory, the left failed to integrate it into a truth by combining the real issues of rewarding effort and ability and achievement together with dealing with the systematic failures that are currently they're very consciously aware of. So what the left did, and I'm going to show the other side of this as well, but what the left did was they said a merit-based system of reward is wrong and threatening to democracy and threatening to equal opportunity and justice for all, because it means that you don't have any uniform kind of framework. You don't have a system. You just have picking and choosing all your cronies. That's what they said. Well, that was actually incorrect. And they were holding this piece of information, and because they didn't integrate it into what they knew, and instead they kind of cancelled it in their mindset, they missed an opportunity. Now, let me turn this around to the other side. There is something that is liberal leaning that the conservative viewpoint also finds very threatening, and that is critical race theory, or abbreviated to CRT. Now, CRT, according to the conservatives, is something that unfairly teaches children to be ashamed of being white. And so what's happened is it's been banned from a number of different schools in a variety of different states and things like that. But the truth is that critical race theory, or CRT, is actually an idea that racism isn't about being a racist. It's about system failure. So this is, legal system or institutions of some kind. If everyone in the system is not racist, The bureaucracy itself is flawed, and its systems of laws and institutions creates a prejudicial outcome anyway, even if the people working in that system are not racist. For as long as it's in the system, it will continue to hold certain groups back for generations. So for generations and generations and generations, regardless of how much effort or achievement you put into your, or dedication you put into your job, for example, or into your future, you could be held back because of this CRT theory of there being a systematic flaw that is no individual's fault. It just happens to be built into the system. But conservatives have done something that have made it difficult to resolve. They have, in power now, banned CRT teaching from certain schools. So there are people of the future who are currently learning in schools who may grow up never having the idea, at least not through the institution of teaching. They may never have the idea of the fact that unfairness typically exists in certain systems, so they won't be able to find a solution. The Carl Jung shadow dynamic theory about this is that the collective shadow took effect again. The right projected its feelings of historical guilt and systematic injustice onto CRT. They projected it onto CRT. And what that means is that the right also failed to integrate what they were holding on to into the other half of the story. So let's pull this together. We're looking at the two different concepts. So the first one we have is meritocracy, which is the true meaning of which is the advancement of an individual based on their ability, their effort, and their achievement, right? So not based on color, not based on nepotism, not based on cronyism, based on merit, that they deserve it. That's one side. And the other side is critical race theory, CRT. And this is the theory where people aren't racist, even if people aren't racist. The systems that they operate within have a legacy of prejudicial outcomes or racism through them, which may not even be deliberate, but it keeps perpetuating the same blockages for the same groups of people for generations at a time. Those are the two things. Both the left and the right, or according to your screen, depending on what you see, I think it's left and right if you're looking, but I'm going to do it my way, otherwise I get confused. The left and the right were each holding a half of the solution. The right was holding the half that speaks about how every person should be rewarded for their skills and their ability and their personal effort. They called it meritocracy. The left was holding the half that speaks about system-based flaws that need to be re-examined so that the skills and ability and effort of generationally marginalized groups don't get disregarded. They called it critical race theory. Both sides showed that they want a fair and equal system that rewards people who deserve it. Both sides held one side of that. What they should have done is mushed it together. And if they'd mushed it together, their two sides would have received an indication of the whole solution that needs to be found. But instead of mushing it together, they projected their shadow fears and grievances onto the other side's half. And that means neither side in itself is a solution all by itself. You can't just use meritocracy to eliminate unfairness. And you can't just fix systems without there being some kind of recognition of the individual and their merit. So neither is a solution in itself. So instead of making something positive grow by mushing it together from a collective shared kind of input, instead they've made it worse than before. And both sides are to blame. This is not about left or right. It's about the psyche. It's about when an idea threatens your story about yourself or, let's be more collective here. Let's just say the idea threatens our story about ourselves. And what we do, instead of thinking about it from the perspective of dealing with our shadow and working on our shadow self, we exile it. And that's what Carl Jung called the projection of the shadow. This is cancel culture. Cancel culture is the projection of the shadow, regardless of whether it's coming from the left or the right. This is what I've noticed, and it's happening across the board. We've got some of the smartest voices in media, people with real talent, and they've got huge audiences. The audiences that they speak to, many of them are sharp and motivated, and they are hungry for a better world. And this is happening on both sides of the political spectrum. But the talent of these on-air voices in media, it's being wasted on division. Things like, reporting on endless scandals and endless outrage. And sure, it's entertaining, or angertaining, I think is more appropriate, but it's entertaining. But it doesn't move us forward at all. I'm not the smartest person in the room, not compared to some of these great big, audience-grabbing people who've got millions of people at their disposal watching them every day. I'm not as smart as they are. But I do know the difference between a solution and a distraction. And having half of something on the left or having half of something on the right and not mixing it together with the other is never going to find you a solution. It's never going to get progress. Never. We need the whole. We need the two halves to work together, and they need to mush. We need a whole of something. And that means working together, not cancelling each other out. But you know what? Maybe that's the reason why I'll never be as popular as any of those big names, because I don't say what's popular. I say what I hope is going to put the pieces together and maybe be heard by someone who is popular one day, who can actually put it into practice. I'll just keep saying it and keep my fingers crossed. Welcome to the new world. This is Ellie Dreams and Under. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and come back again tomorrow. I love knowing you're here, and I'll see you in my dreams. Bye.